how can you honestly say that you've eradicated from yourself idolatry if there's a place where you're afraid of a human being and therefore are willing to compromise and not implement one of the commandments in the Torah, which is that you must defend yourself by preemptively striking against the person that comes to kill you? So is that different than keeping Shabbos?
Thank you for joining Hope for Humanity. This is merely a short excerpt from the full teaching, so you can find below the link to watch the entire video. Everything we do at Hope for Humanity is done with you in mind, so please leave your comments and thoughts below, and be sure to help us spread the message of hope. Thank you, and God Almighty bless you.
It's incredible. You have all these people that are told that they should move to the Holy Land. These Jews are encouraged to make Aliyah, and then told to be there defenseless. And they think that they're doing a mitzvah by living in the Holy Land defenseless. But the Torah doesn't say you have to move to the Holy Land, but it does say you have to defend yourself. So the whole priority is confused. So of course your husband should be doing what he needs to do. And it's going to take him a couple days to get used to it. And he's going to have to figure out how to, if he doesn't know how to use it, then he's going to have to figure it out. But he has to encourage himself, and all the men have to be ready, willing, and able to do whatever it takes. There is no alternative. There is no one else who's offering this service. We went through, you've been here hopefully since the beginning. It's not like you can say, oh, you know what, you're too busy learning Torah. You'll leave us to the security forces. The security forces are checked out. They're not sure which way they're going. All these well-meaning men are walking around in circles out there. They're not even sure where anything's coming from. They're not even sure if today they have orders like this and tomorrow orders like that. So what are you relying on? Now, if you want to say that you rely on God Almighty and you have some sort of teaching that you never touch any means of self-defense, I don't know, that sounds like an Amish guy or Quaker guy. I don't know exactly that doesn't sound like Torah Judaism to me. Okay, at least they claim they're relying on God. At least an Amish guy who's a pacifist, he relies on God and he won't take up a weapon. So at least he has something to rely on, even though it's not the Torah perspective. But a person who says that they're not going to take up the defense because the government said it's illegal for them to defend themselves, and they're promising to take care of you against all evidence to the contrary, and you're not going to do that, not because God said it, but because you are afraid of them? What kind of Torah is that? So I know that I'm saying something that sounds very harsh. Well, people have to wake up. Only way out of this is if people are willing to take the defense of their own selves into their own hands. That's why the War of Independence in the United States was founded upon the precept that everyone had their own weapons. Because it was recognized that you don't have a population to work with for liberty if they're not each individually willing to take the actions necessary to be people with liberty. You're not the material. Your spiritual muscles are undeveloped if you're relying on someone else to take care of you. And the consequences are exactly what we see happening in Israel. So I hope that answers your question about what your husband should do and what the other men should be doing. You don't, now, of course, this is not something I don't think you should put on Facebook what you're doing, because they're likely to be, then targeted, and you don't want to tell other people because you're likely to be targeted. You do quietly what you need to do. And if you're if a person's in a situation and he is so prepared and he carries out an act of defense and saves his life and other people's lives, he shouldn't stand around looking for a hero's reception. He should quickly find himself fleeing with all the other people that are running. and get himself home safely, and not try to claim credit for it, because he's not going to get an award from the people that tried to disarm him and are now upset that he was armed without their approval. After all, he wasn't supposed to be armed. They don't thank him for saving everyone's lives, because that would encourage everyone else to get armed. So they have to punish him. But that's a punishment that people are willing to accept if they're willing to put first what God Almighty has to say. But don't brag about it, and don't tell other people about it, and don't try to claim credit for any acts of heroism that, if God forbid, you need to take action. Hopefully the Israeli army is now releasing weapons, and previously it was being reported that they were not releasing it to the civilians. But obviously every citizen should be armed, and there's no excuse not to allow that to happen. The government has disarmed the majority of the population, unless someone's currently in the reserves or in active duty, or I'm not sure what the status of every reservist is. I don't think that they are allowed to keep their weapons long-term, especially those that go as adults for just a week or two, but I'm not sure what every individual detail, but it's definitely that they are restricting. I heard reports about people even trying to apply for licenses and being denied. So person has to first evaluate over here, what is his Torah responsibility? His Torah responsibility is to if someone's coming to kill him, he has to stand up first and kill him. And that doesn't involve asking permission from the Israeli government first. If the Israeli government is intending to disarm the population and prevent them from having the measures that God Almighty blessed the world with, what's called the Great Equalizer, which is a simple device that's able to take a 80-pound woman and put her able to match the force of a 300-pound armed man, then that is obviously a divine gift. And the Torah requires every person to protect themselves. This is a divine commandment. And the Philistines, the Torah tells us explicitly that gun control is a way of controlling the Jewish population. Gun control has preceded every genocide, and including the Holocaust, including the Armenian genocide, including in Rwanda. So when you see that someone's trying to prevent you from having guns, we didn't even get to discuss this earlier, but this should be, your alarm bell should be going on your head constantly, and therefore compliance is not an option. The difference is that, but there really is no difference between then and now, because then you were afraid of how ferocious the SS officers were going to be if they didn't turn in the register of the Gestapo, or whoever was in charge of registering the guns and stuff like that. But so what are you afraid of today? If you're as afraid of these soldiers and police officers as you would have been in Germany to maintain your weapons when they told you to turn them in, then you have to understand what's really the fear that you're being driven to by these people to disarm yourself. So it's a Torah imperative. Every person has to be armed. If you are able to, if you have everyone should have the funds for it. They unfortunately drive up the prices. Every human being has a right to arm themselves and defend themselves. It's a Torah requirement to stand up and kill the person first. Obviously, who's trying to kill you, obviously, that means you have the means to kill him. People have to start living according to Torah. Torah requires immediately that you use every means to because this is a Torah command. This is not Marxist, the ends justify the means. No, this is Torah requires you to be able to defend yourself. So there's no question that you have to apply for a permit first. People have become so compliance oriented, and this is part of the process, by the way, of people make aliyah to Israel. It's a part of the process of inducing compliance. That's why Americans are the most compliant part of the Israeli population, because they all had to go through an application process, which they have to get approved to come to the land that belongs to the Jewish people. There's no approval. The Torah doesn't have any approval process for a Jew to live in the Holy Land. But since you agreed to an approval process, you've already agreed to the authority of those who give you the approval to be there or not. So you've agreed to follow all the rules. So somehow people are happy to cheat on taxes or whatever. They can just cut corners here or there. But when it comes to this, they're afraid. But this is the Torah. Torah doesn't tell you anywhere to cheat on taxes, but Torah teaches on the contrary. But Torah teaches you to protect your family. So how can you seriously say I mean, I don't mean to question anyone's Torah and mitzvahs, and every mitzvah stands on its own and is eternal. And we would we say Shema Yisrael, hear Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. We mean it with our whole hearts. But how can you honestly say that you've eradicated from yourself idolatry if there's a place where you're afraid of a human being and therefore are willing to compromise and not implement one of the commandments in the Torah, which is that you must defend yourself by preemptively striking against the person that comes to kill you? So is that different than keeping Shabbos?